Hello class, my name is Carity, and today I'm here to talk to you about my proposal for extracting and distilling themes to support semantic harmonization, locally controlled vocabularies, and metadata methodologies. So overall, I aim to develop a standardized set of procedures with which I will be able to codify potentially sensitive, qualitative metadata into more manageable and objective quantitative little bite-sized chunks. So this research will support the creation of a controlled vocabulary, which we will enact with a existing schemata, which is our qualified Dublin core for a project I'll get to in a little bit. According to de Ritter's life rafts for digital content, both the intellectual context and logical context need to be provided when describing an archival item or collection. So that's our goal, that's what we're ultimately working for. But what can we do as students and emerging professionals when this field changes on a day-to-day basis and we still have to compensate for a gap of information, working with collections maybe outside of our original field, maybe outside of our location, and possibly, worst of all, a collection we can't even access. Most of these collections are not online yet. We're not to that point. But we do have an inventory. Expert-created metadata is obviously the highest quality. That's our goal. That's what we're going to strive to do as emerging professionals and as students entering the workforce. But right now there's still a shortage, essentially, of qualified professionals to work with this. And particularly in the digital environment, this limitation is really amplified. So my questions as a researcher are, how can I generate or extract themes from data when I can't read them? Number two, how much sample data do I really need to accurately reflect this collection? Number three, does adding the description field, the data from that column, how does adding that data shift the themes between the analysis of only the titles? And number four, what is going to be the most accurate or efficient process to do this? So am I going to have the easiest time applying a cloud-generated vocabulary, which is what I'll be creating, the Library of Congress, or the index that we have from the original project? And I'll explain that in a second. Currently, I am working with three hypotheses. The first is that word clouds are a reliable and wonderful way to bring together qualitative themes into concrete and quantitative categories so that we can actually work a little bit quicker. My second hypothesis is that catalogers can effectively curate the Library of Congress subject headings for an unfamiliar collection by repeating this process, and basically that it will be something other people can do as well. And my null hypothesis would indicate rather that using manual stemming is not actually worth the trouble, basically, that you would go through to create this vocabulary. Or maybe it's redundant, or just overall not a good fit. The result of this research will allow students, researchers, and scholars a chance to explore an inside look at the steps involved in creating a systematic ontology for controlled vocabularies intended for metadata use. We will have the opportunity to compare and contrast the usability and accuracy of 3 types of controlled vocabularies. As I hinted at in a previous slide, those 3 vocabularies are the cloud-generated vocabulary, which I will create, the Library of Congress subject headings, which I will cross-reference, and the subject matter expert index, which has been digitized but not transcribed yet. So the project that I keep alluding to is from the Society of American Archivists at Wayne State University. That's our student chapter. And shameless plug, if you would like to be involved, please let me know. We'll be starting our meeting soon. And for the past 3 years, we've been working on the Michigan Black History Bibliography as a sort of project for our community. And prior to 2016, I can't find any history about this index, this wonderful collection of material that we have. The index itself is 1,500 item cards, so that each card represents a item, an entity, an excerpt of a book or a thesis or a dissertation, or I've even seen pamphlets or circulars from community outreach. And they're spread amongst at least 10 institutions throughout the community. So the index is digitized, but we were unable to actually manage to optical character recognition these PDFs. There's numerous problems, and it just ended up being faster for us to actually transcribe it into a template. So we are working specifically with a qualified Dublin core base, and our controlled vocabulary, we know we want it to be Library of Congress compliant, but the effort that is taken to transcribe the cards so far is not going to be feasible for the next 2,000 subject index cards. Since October of 2018, we've managed to complete about 90% of these cards. So that would be about double time. By those projections, it would take another 2 years to get all this information online. For those of you who struggle with metadata, here's sort of the basic rundown. You'll see 2 of these are not bold, and that's because they're more administrative than topical. So what we're looking at, this is the International Standard for Organization. They're an international organization that does standardization so that everybody can communicate better. And their standards for metadata are identity, description, usage, event plan, event history, and relation. And the ones that we are the most interested in with this collection is obviously the usage metadata, which is like the rights and whether they're allowed to republish anything or whether they have to pay royalties. Identity, obviously we want to know that we're talking about the right objects, and the description is a part of how we determine that. And number 6, particularly the relation metadata, this would be how the items relate to each other or how they relate to other things outside of the collection. And that is something that we can explore with programs like Omeka if we have the data, which is of course where we always get stuck. So this is an example of metadata that's been input into our template. This template was created by me, and it is based on our selection of qualified Dublin core. And what you're looking at here, the highlighted areas right here are the only 3 required fields for an item. As you can see, even the first 2 here are missing the creator, and that's technically okay. Maybe we don't know who the creator actually was. Or in this case, it looks like the creator was also the contributor, which we decided if it was an organization, we would put it under this label instead. But this is just to give you an idea of what we're working with and what we're looking at when we type these all out. So you may be wondering, why do we even need a controlled vocabulary? Isn't that kind of, why would we want to control the words that people use? But in this case, it's for findability. It's standardization. Working together and being able to communicate across not only just international lines, but again, even our own communities of practice, our own backgrounds, and trying to explain something to somebody from another major, for example. The best first step is to define what you're talking about, and that's kind of the how and why of controlled vocabularies. What we'll be using is a folksonomy, which is a hybrid of taxonomy and folklore. A folksonomy is kind of a controlled vocabulary of the people. So, like if you're familiar with Getty Images, Getty kind of has the official tag guide when it comes to photography. And why do we love folksonomies? Well, they're flexible, but they're also specific. Depending on the perspective you take, they're going to be a bit more accurate than a standardized controlled vocabulary. Unfortunately, there are some translation errors sometimes, and you can err on the side of being a little bit technical, but folksonomies really capture what a collection is really about. So the methodology that I will be using here is sort of an iteration of feedback loops, which is beginning to really be popular with qualitative researchers. Specifically, I will be using a code landscaping method, which literally it's word clouds, which is awesome. But as you can see here, culture and cultural, and I believe history and historical, these are different words, but they're different concepts. So I've got a process that I call manual stemming, where I go through and I analyze the common words based on the root word and whether or not I can combine them into one term. And I have developed a standardized procedure for this. So I'm just going to show you a brief run through of my pilot study, which is kind of where I got the idea to use this as a research paper. This is an example card from the index. As you can see, the includes Detroit among 14 communities. That interjection of handwriting is going to just completely throw off the computer and make this whole card basically unreadable. So instead, here's the process that we've been going through. The cards are broken up into 100 item series, and these were scanned by previous students who were volunteering for the SAA, and was completed when the first year started. When I came into the project, we started extracting the metadata manually because there's literally nothing else we could really do until we had this information. However, once we get the information, I can select by the title only, as you see here in Notepad, good old Notepad, and go to wordclouds.com, which is an open source application here, and they have a lot of features. A lot of folks used to use Wordle, if you're familiar with that, but they don't have support for Wordle anymore. And this is actually a high-powered equivalent. So I get my word list from Wordle, which automatically tallies the number by frequency, right? So I paste that into Excel, and I start stemming. And as I mentioned, stemming is going to have to do with reducing a word or a concept down to the smallest iteration, so that we can combine them and have these themes develop. For example, in this section here, Grand Rapids, we know that's the place, that's the location, Grand Rapids. So at least 15 of the word grand are followed by 15 rapids. And so this is an instance where I will need to go back into the stemming, or back into the program, and actually manually link these words so that the computer can kind of keep up with us here. And in the end, this is one of an example I've got from stemming the titles of this collection. So, in other words, I am going to compare and contrast the usability and accuracy of 3 controlled vocabularies. The cloud-generated vocabulary, which I just demonstrated, is extracted directly from metadata. The Library of Congress subject headings, which we will have to look up using terms from the first group, or the actual subject matter index, which is going to be probably the most specific, but since it's on the index cards, again, it's probably going to be time and cost prohibitive to actually go that route. A handful of the references that I used to research this project, by the way, Saldana's wonderful coding manual for qualitative researchers is fantastic. And if you have any questions, let me know.